Hello, my name is Stephen Mitchell. This is my presentation here in Module 9, case study entitled When Ethics and Policies Collide. As we see here, Section 1, this is a situation where an ethical dilemma takes place where you're faced with what you feel you should do and what you may have to do according to the rules. So essentially, just to kind of set the stage here for who we have in this particular case, we have Richard Inman, who is the assistant principal of this school. We have James, who is a 15-year-old student, troubled student, but sort of getting his life kind of back on the right track. We also have David Ramos, who I believe is younger than him, possibly around the age of 13. He's a scholar student, honor student. And then we also have in play a school police officer, as well as director of secondary education as well too. Where this takes place, Rocket Junior High School, took place on a spring day, starting in the morning time, and a little bit about what is transpiring. Richard Inman, he's a first-year assistant principal at Rocket Junior High. We have James is a 15-year-old student in whom Richard has been cultivating a relationship with. In addition to that, we have David Ramos, who is a standout honor student. James, in this situation, has already been summoned to the principal's office, to discuss his tardies. While he was down there, James's fifth period teacher had called the assistant principal, and she let him know that she had witnessed James giving something what she believed to be drugs to another student in the hallway during what is perceived to be passing period. Since James was already in the office, also David was called down to the office along with the school police officer. The school police officer searched and found that David Ramos had brass knuckles in his possession. James had admitted that the brass knuckles actually belonged to him and that he had threatened David to hold the brass knuckles for him. This section 2, report legal or ethical issues. First part, has anyone been harmed by the action or decision of another, and if so, in what way? This situation, I said yes. The person who was harmed the most was David. Although he wasn't harmed in a physical way, David, I believe, received emotional and psychological harm when James made him hold the brass knuckles. Essentially, he was forced into it, or bullied, if you will, into doing that. This also harms David's good, upstanding reputation. This can affect both boys long term by the decisions that can be made in the possession of the brass knuckles. Second part, does this action or the situation contravene an existing law? I also answered yes to that. The brass knuckles are considered a prohibited weapon on school property, and possession of them is constituted as a felony offense. With that, both boys were handcuffed, taken to jail, and charged with felony possession of a prohibited weapon on school property. And the third part to that was their breach of contract, where the actions discriminatory or constituted harassment. I also answered yes to this. There was a breach of contract in the sense that James brought a prohibited weapon to the school in which it was not even allowed. Also, by the letter of the law, there was a breach of contract by the assistant principal, Richard Inman, when he did not fill out the paperwork to have David also expelled and sent to the district's disciplinary alternative education program, just like how he had already done with James. Section 3. To synthesize this, in this case study, Richard Inman, the assistant principal, is presented with an ethical and moral dilemma where he's trying to decide between what he feels is fair and morally correct and abiding by school laws and policies where his career could potentially be on the line here. Synthesizing the facts here, people place program. Some of the characters in which we mentioned earlier: Richard Inman, first year assistant principal; James, David Ramos, both of them are students there at the school police officer. The parents of the students are also in this case study, as well as the director of secondary education. Place: Rocket Junior High School. Some of these students are from the south side of the town. Program: this is a middle school of 900 students and is a public school. With this, review and prioritize the information. So this is a conflict or situation that can be potentially damaging to the stakeholders and who are in this study. The situation is damaging to both James and David, as both students will be receiving felony charge and expelled from school for 45 days and will have to be in the district's disciplinary alternative education program. DAEP is for the acronym. This is a major conflict for the assistant principal, as he's faced with an official reprimand in his personal file if he does not follow through on the expulsion papers on David. The assistant principal, Richard Inman, James, David Ramos, and his family all have an important stake in the outcome of this situation. Obviously for the principal, vice principal, he has an important stake on this outcome based on whether or not he receives an official reprimand. James is already going to essentially be expelled, since he admitted to forcing David to hold the prohibited weapon, and he's also had troubles in the past. David, if things are followed through, this can also hurt his future as well as his family. All the relevant stakeholders have been consulted. James and David were consulted when they went to the assistant principal's office. Both James's and David's parents were consulted by the assistant principal, and the assistant principal was later on consulted by the director of secondary education, in which he was told he should follow through with the expulsion papers and also expel David as well too. I believe sufficient details about the situation have been given. If there are any additional details given, perhaps by the vice principal, maybe we can learn a little bit more about the situation if need be. And I feel like we know enough to make a solid decision either way here. So section 6, identify options and consequences. What could I do in this situation? So by not making a decision or taking no action, we have here by not taking action, the assistant principal would not only bring down the school police officer to his office, he would not file the expulsion papers for David. That is one option. Another option, comprehensive liberal action. That would be to bring both David and James down to the office without the school officer and consult the students by getting down to the bottom of what exactly happened in this situation. Additionally, you can speak with higher up administrators such as the director, superintendent, school board, and maybe you can see there's any similar cases that have been that has transpired maybe at other schools or within the district itself, and maybe see if there's any ways of getting around expelling David or any exceptions that could be made, since David has a clean record and he's an honor student and has had no violations from a discipline standpoint. As well, when you compile that also into him being forced and bullied into possessing a prohibited weapon that wasn't even his to begin with. Intermediate strategies. We have number 1, speak with the director, superintendent, board member to discuss options or even possible exceptions for David. Number 2, don't fill out expulsion papers for David. Accept the reprimand and the consequences that can follow with that. Number 3, to fill out the expulsion papers for David, but also deal with the guilt that you would feel by maybe not doing what you feel deep down in your gut is right for one of your students, and the backlash you can get from his parents at the same time. And another option could be have David and his parents write up a statement defending his case. Evaluating the options. So by taking no action, by not filling out the expulsion papers, pros: David justifiably remains in school, keeps his good, clean record intact, and his future is good. A con to that would be that the assistant principal would receive his reprimand. Therefore, it would jeopardize his job status as the vice principal. If he does fill out the expulsion papers for David, positive is that, Richard is technically making an ethical choice by following and enforcing school policies, as well as following the directive given by the director of secondary education. The only downside of that is David does get expelled, in which he's innocent, which could also damage his future potential. Third option: speak with the director to discuss options and or exceptions for David. Pro to that would be, the administration could make an exception by specifically looking at this situation and taking into account David's clean record, and maybe an amendment to the school policy based off of this specific situation could be made, and David's not expelled and sent to DAEP. Only downside of that, it would be going against a legal decision that should be made, and the vice principal would still receive his reprimand. And fourth option, have David and his parents write a statement defending his case. Possible that the administration listens, finds an alternative solution for David. And the only downside of that, it would be questions about, is this a legal decision being made, and there would be no specific timeline on the decision that would be made. Choosing the best option, Section 8. Ethical decision making is a very important aspect of being a leader. Cultivating relationships is also very important as well. So by reviewing all the information, facts in this particular case study, we know a moral and sound decision has to be made. I believe the best decision is to speak with the director of secondary education, explore alternative options, maybe possible exception that can be made on David's behalf. You must remain ethical as a leader, but you want to do what's right, fair, and equitable for David. He's one of your students. He's an upstanding student, and he's innocent in this situation. You want to stand up for what's right by him and put his needs first, and not let his future become jeopardized. And also shows that him and his parents, that we want to do what's ethical, but want to make a moral decision for all parties involved. So obviously all stakeholders should be consulted in this situation at all times here. Here we know moral and ethical behavior is important as a leader. First thing I would do is set up a meeting to meet with the director, go into further detail and elaborate the story, explain how James basically forced this other kid into holding this prohibited weapon, but David has no past violations in this situation, and how James would be expelled, but puts in a tough position that David was already in for something he had no control over. But also contact David's parents, let them know we have a meeting set up, that we're working on David's behalf, and they're working through ethical decision making here. And then there's some likely outcomes here that based that maybe an exception could be made based on this situation. Possibly that the director may not meet with the principal, or severe consequences may follow, or maybe an alternate solution may come up as well too. This was a very interesting study and really enjoyed this particular assignment.